Hello, my name is Dr. Peter Lee, and I'm a research fellow at the Center for Regional Studies here at the ASEAN Institute.
I'm Hee-Soo Lee, a research associate in the Center for Regional Studies at the ASEAN Institute.
So today we're here to share our latest issue brief written together titled Reciprocating Trust and Reconciling Ambitions in Korea-U.S. Defense Industrial Cooperation. And we think this is a really important issue to be looking at this particular point in time. So today we thought share a few questions between Hee-Soo and I on what we think are the really important parts of this issue brief. So I might start off with a question for you, Hee-Soo. Why is defense industry in the headlines these days, and why is there so much interest in South Korea in particular?
That's an important question. When I worked as a legislative secretary on the National Defense Committee at the National Assembly in 2022, the Yoon Suk-yeol administration stated an ambitious plan to make South Korea the world's fourth largest arms exporter by 2027. So this was based on the successful awarding of major defense procurement contracts to countries such as Poland, Australia, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. The Yoon administration wants to make South Korea a leader in global arms trade. But South Korea also showing interest in joining ROK-U.S. Pillar 2. So what's your perspective on this issue?
So I think there's a lot of interest amongst US allies here in the Indo-Pacific about deepening defense industrial cooperation. And fundamentally, we think that comes down to the strategic competition with the People's Republic of China and the gross sort of imbalance in defense industrial bases between China and US allies. So the United States is working very closely with its allies, particularly Korea, but also Australia, Japan, the Philippines, and others. And so I was just at the Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore last week, where the multiple US allies released a statement of principles in terms of defense industrial cooperation. So if we look at sort of Korea, Australia, and Japan, for instance, we see that Australia and Japan are moving very rapidly in terms of upgrading defense industrial cooperation with the United States. So we have AUKUS, as Hee-Soo just mentioned, Pillar 1 in terms of nuclear submarines, but also Pillar 2 on advanced capabilities. With Japan, we have a new Defense Industrial Cooperation Acquisition and Sustainment Forum, DCAS, which is being rolled out. So there are a lot of really interesting things happening between the US and its allies, and I think South Korea wants to be a part of that. I guess for Hee-Soo then, the question is, where does Korea fit into this story? What is the history of Korea-US Defense Industrial Cooperation? Where is Korea coming from?
There has been a long history going back to 1970s. The ROK and US first launched Security Cooperation Committee and started discussing arms transfers between two countries. And in the late 1980s, the Defense Technology and Industrial Cooperation Committee was established and began joint research projects. But now under Yoon administration, the ROK is trying to conclude several agreements such as Security of Supply Arrangement, so-called SOSA, and that was signed in November 2023. It allows requests for priority delivery of defense-related orders from each other. And it also addresses supply chain risk associated with single-source suppliers for key weapons components or materials. And the Yoon administration is also finalizing a reciprocal defense procurement, such as RDP agreement. An RDP reduces barriers to arms transfers and co-development and co-production of military capabilities. The US first started signing RDPs during the Cold War, signing 16 agreements during 1970s and 1980s, and now US has RDPs with 28 countries. But among the world's top 10 largest defense exporters, who are US allies and partners, the ROK is the only country that has not yet signed an RDP. So for closer ROK-U.S. defense industrial cooperation, it will need to reconcile distinct ambitions between two countries. So could you tell me what does President Biden want from South Korea?
We think there are many factors for both sides, but Hee-Soo and I have sort of boiled it down to, I guess, two key really driving ambitions for both sides. So for the US administration, and particularly the Biden administration, we look at this alliance integration agenda, and it's expressed in documents such as the integrated deterrence concept, but also the US Indo-Pacific strategy. And it's really about bringing allies together as part of a cohesive lattice work, or what Secretary Austin recently called a new convergence in security cooperation. The second component is, I guess, a bit more transactional. And that's about increasing US defense exports and really supporting the US defense industrial base in promoting exports with allies. And there's a very long-standing tradition of that, And US allies in Asia, so Korea, Japan, and Australia, for instance, account for over 20% of all US arms exports. So those are two really big factors of ambitions for the United States. I guess then for the Korean side, what is the interest in an RDP? What is the interest in closer defense industrial cooperation with the United States?
The Yoon administration has a different set of objectives. First, it hopes that closer defense industrial integration in the model of Australia and Japan will lead to similar alliance status and influence. And this is evident in recent interest by senior ROK officials in joining AUKUS Pillar 2 partnership, following recent announcements that Japan would be invited to cooperate with AUKUS countries. And secondly, the Yoon administration believes cooperation would unlock the growing protectionist mood in the United States. For example, the Buy American Act, so-called BAA, restricts federal government purchase of foreign products, including defense articles. The U.S. Congress is also increasing BAA domestic product quotas to contain at least 55% of U.S. manufactured components, and such requirement will increase to 65% in 2024 and 75% in 2029. So in this situation, how can the two countries improve cooperation?
So I think the most important thing is to have a very clear sense of the capabilities and interests and ambitions of different allies. And no two allies are the same. And I think the Biden administration at least implicitly recognizes this. And so we saw this recently with the US's new regional sustainment framework for maintenance, repair, and overhaul of its vessels in the Indo-Pacific, for instance, where it explicitly sets out the differences between certain allies, those who have shared defense systems, and those who might have complementary capabilities to share. So I think that's one area where we have a clear division of labor, who can provide what. It will really make cooperation easier. I guess for you, Hee-Soo, what are the other steps that the US could be taking?
There are two more steps. First, the ROK and US could cooperate on a single pilot initiatives. Land-based anti-ship missiles and surface-to-air missiles would be promising areas for cooperation. And secondly, two countries could also reflect in the past. The past examples include the US-Japan FSX, fighter jet programs of the 1990s, and other projects such as AUKUS Partnership for Submarines, and Japan, UK, Italy, and Global Combat Air Program to build a next-generation fighter jet could also offer lessons for ROK and US defense cooperation.
So the cover photo for our issue brief this time is about US aircraft manufacturing from the Second World War, just a few years into that conflict. And that was really a time where the United States was so-called the arsenal of democracy. And it produced almost 300,000 fighter jets during the course of World War II. And we really wanted to look back on that period and see what Korea, Australia, Japan, and other allies can contribute, because we think that era has passed. The era of multipolarity is here. And allies have a lot of things to contribute to collective defense industrial cooperation. So that's really where this issue brief adds to that conversation, and we hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.